So I was praying this week about what to share, and I felt like God said to me to share the story of how this church started. And I don't mean 12 months ago. I don't mean when we launched. Like, how many of you know that before you can start something, there's got to be this period of pregnancy. There's got to be this waiting that happens first. And so this church, whilst it officially launched 12 months ago, it actually started with a word. And that word came 16 years before. Wow. So this church is 17 years old, in a sense. And I had this moment when God spoke to me completely out of the blue in a crazy, undeniable way. And he gave me this picture of a church. And the church was 2,000 people. It was wide, it wasn't deep. And on the walls were flags. And I knew that each of the flags represented places that we'd planted new churches. And I don't know why, but I believed it in that instant. And it felt right. It felt good. And then for the next 8 years, I got my life right with God. I tried to sort myself out first. I don't think that you can lead other people if you can't lead yourself. And so I started trying to get healthy and get whole. I then started to invest in other people. I became a youth worker. And for 8 years, I trained, I stretched myself, I practiced, and did everything that I could so that I could launch this church. And after 8 years, this church was growing bigger and bigger in my stomach. It was there, and it was undeniable, and I couldn't not do anything about it anymore. I was desperate to see this church started. And so me and Emma, we said, Lord, just tell us where. Just tell us where to go. It could be anywhere you send us, and we won't question it. We'll just go and see what happens. Anywhere you want in the world except Manchester, was what I said. So God then turns around and he says, Manchester. And I had this, and it kind of happened. I was just praying, and I just couldn't stop thinking about Manchester. And I realized that must be God. So we quit our jobs. We took our savings. We had enough money to last a couple of months. And we moved to Manchester. And I don't know what I expected, I don't know what I thought was going to happen, because Emma's family's in Manchester, so we knew a couple of people, but besides them, we knew no one. And I had this kind of funny idea, maybe I would go into Manchester, I'd walk into a pub, and I'd order a pint, and on a table next to me, there'd be a group of people saying, hey, we really feel like we should plant a church if only we had a leader to lead us. And I'd be like, hey guys, I am your leader and I am here and I'm ready to lead you into glory. Or I don't know what I thought it would be like. I had these but I had faith. I think sometimes naive faith is good. I think there's a holy naivety which helps us to make dumb decisions for the glory of God. And I had that holy naivety. And so we got here, and I remember praying and saying, God, where? Manchester's bigger than I thought it was going to be. There's a lot of people. Where do we even start? What do we do? And God was just silent. You see, for my whole journey as a Christian, I've always found that my experience has been, when I pray, I hear God speak back. And that's been time and time again. And then I take this huge leap of faith. I don't have any idea what I'm doing, and I pray, silence. Do you know how unnerving that is? When you have no idea what you're about, what you're supposed to be doing. And I got desperate. I was praying again and again and again. And maybe I need to fast. Maybe I need to do something. I'm praying all the time. Silence, just nothing. Yeah. And it was hard. And I just had this idea. I thought, I'll go and visit other churches and I'll see what God's already doing. And maybe I'll just jump on board with what he's already doing rather than start something new. And I'm visiting all these churches. And I went to this one really amazing church over in Salford called Lighthouse Church, led by a guy called Paul Hallam. He's just an absolute hero. And he had this word, and he said, there's someone here. I've got a word for someone, and they're here. And have you ever had that experience where it's like your whole body just goes goosebumps and tingles, and you're like, okay, this is it, Lord. I know this is what you want to say to me. I'm ready. And he said, okay. He said, I've seen a picture of bamboo. And the bamboo gets planted in the soil, and it stays under the soil for 6 years. And no one sees any growth for 6 years. And then overnight it explodes out, and in 48 hours it grows 60 feet. You can literally walk through the forest and watch it grow around you. He He said, somebody here has got a promise from God, and God wants to tell you that he's faithful, but you have to wait. And I was like, how dare you? How dare you give me a patience word? Tell me to be courageous. Tell me to go for it. Tell me it'll be all right. Tell me he'll provide. Tell me revival's coming. Tell me something, but don't tell me to do nothing, because I don't want none of that. I was so mad. And then I was like, 6 years. That's a metaphor. That has to be a metaphor, right? It says in the Bible, a day is an eternity for the Lord. 6 years, that's like 6 weeks, surely. Because God, time, he's got this kind of like flexible relationship with time. So like 6 weeks, that's fine. I'll wait 6 weeks for you, Lord, if I have to. And I was so mad. And so I waited. 6 weeks came and went. And every time I prayed, I was like, God, I just want to do this. And this isn't a bad thing that I want. Surely this is a good thing. This is a thing that you told me to do. And I want it. I want to accept it. I want to step into it. Can I do it now? And every time I prayed, God said no. That's all I got every time. Just no. No. And I remember after about 4 or 5 years, I was getting really frustrated. And I said, I know you, God. You're good. You're gracious. You're loving. If I just go and do it anyway, you'll bless me, won't you? Because that's who you are. You're a blesser. And I felt like God said to me, yeah, I'll bless you, even if you do it wrong. But don't. So I said, oh, okay, I won't. And I waited. And I waited. And I waited. And I wonder whether some of us here feel the same way, that you've got promises that you've been holding on to, and you've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and it gets harder and more frustrating. Maybe it's a ministry thing, maybe it's a calling thing like mine, or maybe it's a family thing. Maybe you've got promises over your kids and you're watching them walk away from God and you're trying everything that you can do, and yet nothing is helping. Or maybe it's your health. Maybe there's someone you love and their health isn't right. And you've been praying and praying and praying, and you think the breakthrough's going to come, it's going to be now. Is it here yet? And it doesn't matter what you do. You keep praying, and it doesn't happen. And every year, you start to hope less. You know, maybe at the start you were excited, you were gung-ho, you were like, I believe God can do all things, and yet, as you've waited, it's become harder and harder. And you started to wonder whether you were naive in the first place, whether the dream will ever come to pass, whether anything is ever going to change, or whether actually this is just it. And this, for me, is the story of Abraham. This is the picture that I see in his story. He has had this incredible promise. God has said to him, I want you to leave your home, I want you to go, and I'm going to make you a father of nations. He says, as many as there are stars in the sky, that's how many your descendants are going to be. You're going to be a father. I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to bless the entire world through you. And Abraham believes him, and he steps out and he goes. And then God doesn't speak to him for 13 years. I wonder sometimes whether hope is at its most important at the times when God isn't speaking. Think back 13 years in your life. Think how much your life has changed in 13 years. Think about the things that you have been through in 13 years. And Abraham is waiting and waiting. And this tension grows in his story because God has promised him that he's going to be the father of nations. And yet it turns out that he can't even be the father of one. That he's struggling to even be a dad of one person. His wife Sarah is barren. She can't have babies. And he's getting more and more frustrated. And we get these same moments when it's like, God, why is this promise not happening? Why have I not got this dream? Why is this expectation not where I'm at? And then after 13 years, God comes to him again. And he speaks the same promise over him again. And he says, you're going to be a father of many nations. As many as there are grains of sand in the desert, that's how many children you're going to have. I don't know what you would have been feeling, but for me, I'd have been like, well, God, it's too late now. Abraham was 99 years old by this point. The Bible describes him as saying his body was as good as dead. Doesn't matter what translation you use, that's never a compliment. His body was as good as dead. Like, why didn't you do this earlier when I was young and I had energy? Why didn't you give me the promise that you promised me when I was ready for it? In my 20s, we could have had loads of kids. It would have been easy. I'm 99 years old. I'm past it. We missed the opportunity. It's too late now. My body isn't even working anymore. And God comes and he says, do you know what? Now is the time. And I'm going to fulfill my promise. I sometimes wonder whether God waits for us to get to a point where we realize that we couldn't even do the small promise in our own strength before he shows us the big promise that he's only going to be able to do through his power in our lives. You see, in these moments, what I find is that we look at the situation, and yet God is concerned about generations. You see, what God does is he says to Abraham, his name was Abraham at this point, he says, Abraham, I need you to change your name. Abraham means exalted father. He says, you're no longer going to be the exalted father. This is no longer about you becoming a father. You need to recognize that your name is Abraham now. Abraham is the name that means father of many nations. He had this moment, he says, you thought that the promise, you thought that the gift was for you to become an exalted father. It's not even about you. Wow. It's about what I want to do through you. Wow. You're looking at a situation, I want to see the generations that come through you. I think so many times in our lives we're frustrated in the moment, and we need to recognize that God will let you go through a difficult situation because he wants to birth something far greater and far longer through you than you could have ever imagined.
That's right, bro.
We get lost in that moment. You know, every battle that you have with the enemy, every voice that comes to limit you is a battle for your future.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we're here fighting for the present argument, the present day, and we miss that God has a greater plan. He has a greater purpose. What he wants to birth through you is going to reach so many more. I believe that there's businesses inside people here which are going to reach far more people than we can imagine. That there's ideas, that there's dreams, that there's investment, that we're going to see an avalanche of blessing. We so often think that the blessing is for us, that it's to us, and we miss the fact that we're stewards. And that the blessing actually goes through us.
Yeah, come on, it's good, bro.
And this is what God is speaking to Abraham. He's like, Abraham, you don't even feel like a man right now, but I'm going to make you a father of many. That seed that is dead, I'm going to bring to life. And I'm going to start something in you which is going to change everything that comes afterwards. And then you follow Abraham's descendants and you get to this guy called Jesse. And you follow Jesse's story, and he has a son called David. And David becomes a king, and you follow his descendants and you get all the way down to a woman called Mary. And Mary has a son, and the son is called Jesus.
Wow.
And you find from Abraham's faith, we go all the way down to Jesus, and now we sit here, you and me, all of us are the descendants of Abraham. He is our spiritual great-great-great-great-grandfather.
Wow.
Because of his faith.
It's good, Ben.
Hebrews says it like this. It says, it was by faith that even Sarah was able to have a child, though she was barren and too old. She believed that God would keep his promise. So a whole nation came from this one man who was as good as dead. A nation with so many people that like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, there was no way to count them. All these people died believing what God had promised them. They did not receive what was promised, but they saw it all from a distance and welcomed it. They agreed that they were foreigners and nomads here on earth. I think that we spend so much time looking at the situations, we spend so much time thinking about the promises, that we end up minimizing them and not seeing the fullness of what God would want to do through them. It says in this verse that Abraham didn't even get to see the promise fulfilled. God had promised him that he was going to be a father of many, that he was going to have descendants like the stars in the sky. Did he see that? No. He never even got to see it. what if there's promises in your life that you'll never see fulfilled, but that you still have to hold on to? You still have to hope for. You still have to have faith for, because what God wants to do is far greater than your life. That he wants to birth something in you that's going to be through you. That we're going to see generations and generations of people blessed beyond us. That people are going to look back at us and they're going to say, do you know what? We have this example in those guys who started this church with crazy faith. They didn't even know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And what we are now living in is their faithfulness.
Wow.
We are now living in the fruit of their blessings. We are now living in the fruit of their hope, because they did not minimize the gifts to their own lives.
Wow.
I believe that what God wants to birth is going to be so far greater than us, and we have to look beyond it.
Come on, man. That's it.
You know, I was there 6 years later with this promise. 6 years I've been waiting and getting frustrated. And I prayed the same prayer again. God, I want to do this. I want to plant this church. Can I do it? And he said, yes. And I was like, thank you, Jesus. And then he said, you can do it, but I want you to think about doing something else first. And then that eventually led to me becoming the leader of the church that I was part of. And what was incredible was that first Sunday when they prayed me in, when they said, we want to pray for you to be the leader, that was my 6-year anniversary in Manchester.
Wow.
Like it blew me away. I couldn't believe how faithful God was to that promise.
Wow.
And now here we are, 3 years later again. And we're here, and I think that we're building a church where we want everyone to come and feel loved, and feel valued, feel welcomed, feel honored. We want to build a church here today where our worship touches heaven and it moves earth. You know, where something changes when we engage with God. We want to build a church where we see leaders raised, who are going to go from here and transform this nation. I have dreams that this church is going to impact thousands and thousands of people's lives. And we're not there yet, but that's the whole point. We're starting a journey. We're not at the end of the journey. We're in a situation, but we're dreaming about the generations. And I look and I'm like, do you know what? I genuinely love our church more than any church I've been a part of. I absolutely love what God is doing here. I love you guys. I love the culture. I love everything.
Yeah.
But when I look back, I've realized that this church isn't even ours. The good stuff in this church hasn't even come from me. And if I'm entirely honest with you guys, it hasn't even come from you either. You see, I look back at this last 16 years that I was waiting. And my mind thinks back to my dad. My dad who said, I believe that you can do anything that you put your mind to. That if you want to do something, it doesn't matter how big or scary it is, you just go for it and God will back you up all the way. And he planted that seed in me, which has always stayed with me in every difficult situation. I then think back to Anthony Delaney. When I was in my early 20s, I was a youth worker without any qualifications, any clue. And he took a punt on me. And he put me in situations constantly that would stretch me, that would challenge me. And he kept on saying, I see more in you, I see more in you. Why don't you try this? Why don't you do this? And he invested in me and he's spoken to me. I think about Colin Bond, who was the first person to give me a platform and say, I want you to preach to these people. I think that you've got a word from God for them. I think about Gerald Coates. When I first told anybody that God was calling me to plant a church, he came up to me and he said, I see that in you.
Wow.
I believe that's true. I believe that you could do this. I believe God has got big plans for your life. And you need to go for this. And you need to be courageous. And he spoke that dream into life. You have no idea how powerful that conversation was in my life. No one had ever told me that they believed in me like that until that moment. And there's so many other. I think of Paul Lloyd. I think of Phil Smith. I think of Andy Chadwick. I think of John Warren. And these guys have been around me all through my journey, speaking into me, encouraging me, challenging me, calling the best out of me. And every good thing that I see here now, I have to look back and say, this isn't even mine. I've just stewarded the blessings that other people have sown into me. And I'm now able to pour them out. You see, we aren't Abraham. We aren't at the beginning of the story. We exist midstream.
Wow.
As I talk about this, maybe even now you're sitting here and there are names that are coming into your head. There are people you're thinking about who have sown into you and invested in you. Or perhaps you're sitting here and there's a void. And you feel that. You feel the hollowness of that, and you wish that somebody had just taken you under their wing and just sown into you. And you can't change one way or another what has been, but I want to challenge you with two things today. Who is it that is sowing into your life right now, and whose life are you sowing yours into?
Wow, that's good.
If we exist midstream, whose water is flowing into yours, and how are you flowing into somebody else's? I think so often we're like a tap, and the tap is just turned off. It doesn't matter how much water pours your way, if the tap's turned off, nothing's going to come through. So I've been thinking about this, and for me, the passage in the Bible which speaks into this is found in Ephesians chapter 4. And it's quite a famous passage. In every church that I've been to, we've spoken about this. And yet I think that a lot of the time we speak about it in the wrong way. So in Ephesians 4 it says this. It says, "Now these are the gifts that Christ gave to the church. The apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors and the teachers. Their responsibility is to equip God's people to do his work and build up the church, the body of Christ." Now every time I've heard this spoken about in church, every time I've preached about this, I've always preached about it and then kind of talked about it in terms of a personality test. You know, like, which one are you? Are you an apostle, or are you a prophet? Are you an evangelist? And I'm trying to figure it out, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's really a good and a helpful and a healthy thing, I think. But I also don't think that that's what Paul's doing with this verse. Who are we in this verse? I think we are God's people. I think we are the body of Christ. So Paul says that there's these people, and their responsibility is to equip us, to speak into us, to build us up. And I wonder what the voices look like in your life. Imagine if we had these different voices, how rich and how full they would help us to make our lives. So if you don't know what these words mean, which is really reasonable because they're not normal words that we use, an apostle is, put your thumb up, an apostle's like a thumb. The word apostle means sent one. It's actually the same word as missionary in a different language. An apostle is a sent one. I say that they're like a thumb because apostles can be incredibly flexible. So a thumb is the only finger that can touch all the other fingers. Apostles can do different things in different circumstances. But when we find them in the Bible, they tend to be two things. They tend to be a voice of creativity, a voice of inspiration, a voice which is trying to stir the church up to do new things. And in the Bible, they were also a voice of authority. This is the voice that speaks to you and says, well done. You're doing a good job. Keep going. This is the voice that says, you must do this. You need to do that. This is the voice that says, I see these gifts in you. I call this out of you. You can do these great things. It's the voice that says, you know what? It is now time to act. That's the apostolic voice in your life. And in its greatest, this is a voice which empowers us, which inspires us, which gives us courage and freedom. And yet at its worst, this is a voice that has the danger of being controlling and aggressive. And so often we've encountered the negative version of the voice that we then decide we don't want to hear the positive voice. The prophetic voice is, which finger do we use for the prophetic voice? I think it's the point, no it's not, it's the middle finger. Do it that way around please, or I'm going to be very offended. Hold up your middle finger. This is the prophetic voice. We choose the middle finger because it should be the longest, unless you were born in a swamp. It should be your longest finger, and it's the voice which is the closest to God. That's really weak why we use the middle finger for that, but that's why we're doing it. So this voice is all about wisdom. It's about hearing God's voice. It's about different input, different direction. This is the voice that's concerned first and foremost with what God thinks about a situation. And sometimes these guys can come in, they can be brutal because they want to say what God is thinking. Sometimes these guys come in and they can be weird because they spent a lot of time in spiritual stuff and not that much time in normal stuff, and they say words like Shekinah, and I just don't even know what they're talking about. And so there's a danger that they can be a bit weird or a bit aggressive, and so sometimes we push them away because we don't like either of those things, do we? We like stuff to just be normal and to be helpful and to be like me. But this voice is a voice of wisdom. It's the voice that comes in and it says, well, why don't you consider the opposite? What if you look at this from the complete other way around? This is the voice that says, this is what I sense God is doing in this. This is what's happening that people can't see. And this is a valuable voice for us. The evangelist is the pointer finger, and this is the voice that's always pointing at God. In every situation it's pointing, and I think that this is the voice that's the challenge. Have you ever gone to somebody and what you really needed was a friend, and then they told you everything that you were doing wrong? That's the voice of challenge. This is the voice that says, stop wimping out. You need to step up. This is the person that says, like, you need to man up or woman up. This is the person who's like, they're calling more out of you. They're saying, do you know what? Your life isn't even for you. Look at all the people around you that are watching your life. You need to be a better witness. You need to think more about the people who are going to be transformed through you. You know, get on with it. And this can be a brutal voice as well. But it's a vital voice and it's a healthy voice. And then we have the pastoral voice. This is the voice that everyone likes. The voice of fun. The voice of caring. The voice, they might not be able to tell you how to fix anything, but they'll give you a hug. And they'll tell you that you're awesome and that you don't really need to change, at least not too fast, because you're pretty amazing. And God made you the way you are. And they just love you. And they just love you as you. And we all need those people in our lives who'll just come around us, who'll cry when we're crying, who'll laugh when we're laughing, even if they don't get the joke. You know, they're just with us, they're for us. This is the pastoral voice. And I think that they ask the questions that are most helpful to us growing as people. You know, how's your quiet time? How's your prayer time with God? That's a pastoral question, because they care about you. Are you resting enough? What are you doing on your day off? You look tired. Have you had a holiday? These are the people who are going to ask you some really great questions. And then the final one is the teacher. And I'll be honest with you, Emma's not here. Me and Emma, we debate this because I think that this isn't even a real one in the Bible. I won't go into it too much because it's just crazy. But I just have to say I don't think it's there. But most people do think it's there. So I don't want to be too controversial, so I say it. But I'm just saying with brackets. Take it or leave it. And so the teacher, though, because I think the teacher is all of these voices. I think that the teacher is the person who's equipping you. The person who's giving you practical tools. The person who's not just saying, go reach some people, see you later. And you're like, okay, I have no idea how. The teacher's like, here's some ideas. Like, try this. That isn't working, try that. Okay, try this other thing. They're the ones who really want to equip you. They're the ones who say, don't just read the Bible. This is how you understand the Bible. This is how you interpret it. And so teachers can be the most valuable person because they're going to level you up. They're going to skill you up. And yet at the same time, we sometimes don't like teachers because we look at their lives and we're like, well, it's great you know all this stuff, but what are you actually doing? And we can feel like they're hypocritical. And so at its best, a teacher is going to absolutely invest in you. And at its worst, a teacher is somebody you look at and you're like, oh, I don't really get you. Does that make sense? Do we get this? This is the fivefold ministry in a nutshell. And my point of all of this isn't to ask yourself who you are. Because you're all of them. You're all of those voices. Sometimes I'll get in a conversation and I'll be like, you're looking at this from the complete wrong side. I think you need to turn this around and look at it from a new angle. Sometimes I'll get in a conversation and I'll say, do you know what? I see this in you. I think that God has got so much for you. I see passion, I see courage, I see leadership, and I'll call that out of people. In another conversation, I'll turn around and I'll say, look, mate, right now you don't need a hug, you need some truth. Like, you don't need me to come and cuddle you, you need me to come and tell you what's what. And other times I'll come and I'll be like, actually, no, you do just need a hug. And so I have all of these voices inside of me. And I try to speak the right one at the right time. But what I've found is that I don't have all of these voices around me. I haven't permissioned them in different ways. I want to try something. I wasn't going to do this, but I think I might try because it could be fun. Anybody up for just a little bit of fun for a minute, see if this works? Has anybody got a situation or a challenge, something that they're going through that they would be happy to share about in like 2 seconds? Anybody, just, it can be as big or as small as you like. It doesn't have to be, I think that the world is ending. It can just be like a little thing. Anybody got anything happening in their lives right now? No one has anything. No one's courageous enough. Come on, somebody. Who's just got something? It could be a small thing. Who? Ah, yes, Simon. Okay, I was going to ask you to get up. Are you all right to come over this way?
Is it alright if I stay here?
Okay, we're going to try it with you staying there. Okay, so let's go. Let's just what is the situation? What's the thing?
Okay, so I'm trying to lay the foundation for a business. Okay, yeah. I'm trying to lay the foundation for a business. It's something I've been doing now for probably over a year, and it's kind of getting there, but I'm not quite at the point of jumping off yet. So yeah, that's the situation.
Okay, so business coming, you're getting there, and it's not quite ready. Okay, so what I want to ask, Daniel, can you come forward? Josh, can you come forward? I was going to ask Emma, maybe not. Who else can I ask? Let's get Lucy, can you come forward? Let's get Sam, can you come forward? No, you're fine. I've now chosen Lucy, who is brilliant. So, what I'm going to ask you guys to do is to speak into that situation. But I want you to speak into that situation with a specific lens. So Daniel, I want you to speak into it with the voice of an apostle. You're going to speak as somebody with some authority. It might be well done, it might be a commissioning thing, it might be something, but that's going to be the voice you speak with. Josh, I'm going to ask you to speak with the voice of a pastor, as a friend, and just speak what you want to say, any advice. Lucy, I'm going to ask you to speak with the voice of an evangelist, somebody who's going to bring a challenge or something which is loving but not necessarily hard. And Sam, I'm going to ask you to speak with the voice of a prophet. And what I mean by that is there some wisdom or some other way of thinking that might be helpful for somebody in this situation? Have you guys got it?
Yeah.
Give you a second to just breathe.
Can you just remind us again of the situation?
So the situation was that you...
No, I was listening.
This is okay, this is good because now this is getting real, right? So the situation was that you've got this business, it's a business that's about to start, you want to launch it, but it's not quite there yet. And you're kind of, is it fair to say you're in a bit of a no man's land, or how would you describe what you feel right now?
Yeah, I would say I was thinking I was going to do it sooner. I was working towards an earlier start, and it kind of, I had to make a decision about whether I was going to go one way or another way with a certain task, and I've gone the other way, and it's taken a bit longer.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
Okay. And how do you feel at the moment within it? Like, what's your feeling?
Okay, so I'm quite excited about it. I'm trying to work step by step. I have a condition which makes things difficult sometimes. But yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm optimistic, more optimistic than I used to be.
Apostle Daniel, what would you share with Simon?
Okay. I will say, keep going, bro. I know it might feel like there's a no man's land and the waiting is a bit longer than you thought it would be, but just keep persevering, keep running the race, keep running. Don't give up, don't throw in the towel, because what you're doing is good, man, and the best is yet to come. That's what I'll say.
Great, thank you, Daniel. Pastor Josh.
Yeah, man. Simon, I feel God would say to you that you're stronger than you think you are, and you're not inadequate. And God's put everything in you that you need to achieve this task. You're amazing. The business that you've got is going to do way more than you think it's going to do. God's going to bring in way more money than you think He's going to bring in, and you're going to be blessed to be a blessing.
Amazing. Evangelist Lucy.
Don't do it.
So this is the voice of honesty and challenge.
I think, this is loud. I think it's a case of maybe not trying to hide the things that you think people don't want to hear about, maybe like almost like you said, you maybe have a condition. I think it's important not to hide that. I think people will see that and think that's a great inspiration, and what you're doing is amazing. I think it's a case of not hiding the things that maybe you want people, maybe they don't want to see that. I think it's important that you keep that kind of not at the forefront, but definitely not hiding it.
It's really good.
It's really good. Thank you, Evangelist Lucy. Prophet Sam. Come away from Liam, just in case.
Simon, I feel like you've got the ideas, you've got the skills to take this business forward, but I think God's going to align you with a community of people that are going to sharpen you, that they're going to bring their own ideas to your business, and these individuals are going to join with you just to take it to that next step. And so whether that's people from Soul City or around you, I feel like God's going to position these people who have got, you know, amazing skills, whether it's in finance or entrepreneur, or they've got their own business ideas and their own businesses going well, but they're going to input that into your own business and your own life and take it to that next step.
That's so good.
So good. Can we thank these guys? We thank Simon as well for being the one person courageous enough to actually share something.
That's Simon.
Simon, how was that? What was that like for you? Just shout.
Yeah, that was amazing actually. Yeah, thank you.
That was helpful, was it?
Very, very much so. Yeah.
Great. Out of interest, do you think that you have those 4 voices around you normally, or is there any of those voices that you particularly were like, oh, I need more of that kind of voice in my life?
Well, I have the encouragement. I have the pastor, which is my wife.
Correct answer.
I think we had, because we haven't been involved in church as much, we've been away from some of the voices, like the encouragement and the kind of direct, like, you are doing well, this is going forward. So yeah, it's been difficult because those voices haven't been around. But yeah, that's really encouraging.
Great. Thank you, Simon. So I want to ask you, what voices do you have speaking into your life? Do you have all of those voices speaking into you? Do you have somebody who's actually got some authority to speak into your life? And authority doesn't mean boss. It means you've given it to them. You've permissioned it. You said, I give you authority to speak into my life, to permission me, to tell me what's what. Have you got somebody who's just there for you, thick and thin? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what happens. They're there with you. And they just love you, and they're going to call out the best in you. Do you have somebody who loves you enough to tell you the truth? We've got friends who love us enough to tell us the truth, and it's not always easy, but it's always valuable. And you have other people around you who are going to just bring a completely different angle. What are the voices that you are missing in your life? So we receive from other people. Just take a moment, perhaps. Could you put your hands out in front of you? Like 2 hands like this. This is a receiving posture. We ask people to do this in church all the time. And we receive from God, but we receive from the people around us, the people who invest in us. And we permission that as well. And now what I'd like you to do is to turn your hands upside down like this. That's a body change, but it's also a fundamental attitude change. That's a giving posture. And so we receive and we give. We receive and we sow. We receive and we give. And if you spend all of your time receiving, you'll end up bloated and frustrated. If you spend all your time giving, you'll find yourself dry and burnt out. You have to have a rhythm. You have to have the voices around you that you're speaking into. You have to have the voices around you that are speaking into you. It's a rhythm, in and out. In and out. We breathe in, we breathe out. We receive, we give. That's the pattern that we have to have. And I find that for me, a lot of the time I don't really know how to do this. And I talk to people and they say things like, no one wants me to be their mentor. I don't have anybody no one's asked me, or I don't have anybody I have that in, or people say, do you know what, I'm just too busy. I've got a job, I've got kids, I've got a gym membership, or whatever it is you got. But we find reasons why we don't do this. And I was thinking about how we can do this and I think this looks like in a healthy way. And when I look at the life of Jesus, I think he does it in stages. He starts with the 3 people that are closest to him. And so for me, when I think about this, I always say family first. If I'm not sowing into my family first, I don't think I should be sowing anywhere else. They're absolutely my priority all of the time. I don't want to get to the end of my ministry and look back and think that I did all of this at the expense of my kids. That's what I call a counterfeit victory. My family is first. I believe it doesn't matter what your calling is, what your priorities are, and everything else, that your first calling is your family. And you get to decide who that is. That could be your brothers, your sisters, your mum, your dad, your kids. It looks a bit different for everyone, but for me, I would say my 3 is my family, and they're who I invest in first. And then Jesus has the 12 disciples who he went around with all the time. And so for me, I look at my life, and I've intentionally got people who are my core. There's the core team in the church, and if they ask me of something, anytime, of any day, I'm an open book. I'm there for them. I will give anything that I can. I've got a few close friends who are around me as well. And then there's a couple of other people who I have this kind of much more formal mentoring relationship with. And so I would say that maybe 15 people for me is my core. And I prioritize them. If I want to go to play snooker, those are the people I call first. If I want to go and just hang out, those are the people I'm investing in first. I've decided who my core are. Then I've got the 72. Jesus had the 72 that he sent out around him. And for me, that's the church. That's you guys. You're my 72. I hate to tell you this, you come third in my priorities. You come after my family, you come after my core team, because I just recognize that I don't have the capacity to invest in everybody in the way that I would want to. So I have to be intentional so that I invest in people in a healthy way for me and for those around me. And so then that's you. That's why I get here early on a Sunday morning, because I want to create an environment for you to come into. I don't come to church thinking, how's church going to bless me? I come to church thinking, how can I pour out some of the blessings that I've already been blessed with into other people? I don't come and I think, how can this all be about me? I come and think, how can I be here, blowing out, investing? You guys are my 72. And then outside of this, I've got the crowds, and that's just everyone else. And I pray for my city. I'll go and I'll speak with people, and I'll do things for other people. But I know where they sit in my priority system. And what I've realized is that the times when I haven't actually been intentional and set this out are the times when I've actually had no impact anywhere, where I've actually stopped flowing into people's lives because I'm trying to flow everywhere and it's had no impact. And so I created this system. And then maybe you're like, well, I don't even know what I would do. I don't really know what flowing looks like. And I would say if somebody looks like they need a hug, then just give them a hug. If somebody looks like they need some wisdom, then just try your best to say something that sounds profound. If somebody looks like they're getting comfortable, then start challenging them again. If somebody looks like they need something calling out of them and permission, then be that voice of permissioning and speak it out. And I think it actually doesn't matter if you get it all wrong. The most valuable thing in these situations is just somebody pointing their energy at you. It's just all about energy, just somebody saying, I give you my focus for this time. That's one of the most valuable things in the human experience, I think. So don't be afraid. Don't talk yourself out. Don't psych yourself out. Don't be like Abraham saying, I'm too old. The time has gone past. Don't say I'm too young. Say, I've got something that I can share with people. I want to finish with just one more really practical thing, because this has been quite a practical Sunday. So we're going to finish with one more practical thing. And I was at a conference last week called Launch. It was a church planting conference. And the guy who heads up, we're in a New Thing network. The network we're part of is called New Thing. And this is a church planting network. And the guy who heads up the network finished by sharing the 4 most powerful letters in the world. He said there's 4 letters that are more powerful than any other letters in the world. He said the letters are I-C-N-U. I-C-N-U. And he said that if you use those letters and you turn to somebody and you say, I see in you this, that you will have these powerful conversations. And then he did this thing which made me really, really uncomfortable. And I'm an extrovert, so I like people. And I felt uncomfortable by this. He said, what I want you to do is to stand up. Everyone stand up. And I want you to find somebody else, either 2s or 3s, and to get into pairs or 3s. Everyone find 2s or 3s, get into pairs or 3s. And he said, I'll wait while you move into your 2s or 3s. And he said, what I want you to do is to look at the person you're with and just say, I see in you, and just tell them whatever it is that you see. Whatever it is that you see, you can take a moment, you can pause. So I'm in this environment, and I'll tell you how it went for me first. I'm in the environment, and there's this girl next to me, and she comes over, and she's really confident and going for it. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll let you go first. That's helpful for me. And then it was my turn. I didn't know what to say. So I turned to her and I said, I see in you. And I looked into her eyes, and I just saw love and kindness. And I said, I see in you love and kindness. I see in you somebody who values people. And when you value people, they feel valuable. And that's a gift that's from God. And she started crying. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to deal with tears. I'm a guy. Like, you're leaking everywhere. Make it stop. And she was like, no, this is the good kind of crying. She's like, God's been speaking to me about this time and time again. And just having somebody say it out loud crystallized all the thoughts, all the emotions, all the ideas. When we say these letters to people, it is powerful. So if you're in three, you'll just have to take turns and go around, but look at the person and say, I see in you. And just say something. What do you see?